My name is Shabbir Helaly. I'm from Mirrors by Silverpush. And, we do precision contextual targeting across YouTube, Instagram, and also Facebook, curating and indexing YouTube video IDs based on faces, logos, objects, scenes, actions, backgrounds. And so when I got matched up with Ali, I was really excited because I'm like, wait a second, we're not really involved in retail media, but it was an opportunity to really learn more about what's happening in that sector and also how it just overall informs our omni-channel buys, right? So Ali heads retail media for PepsiCo across Circle K, Target, and also
7-Eleven.
7-Eleven.
C&G.
There you go, C&G, Ali.
As you now have learned.
Something in gas.
It's not Coke and Gatorade.
that was my initial guess. Yes.
Was yesterday.
Apologies. Yeah.
Convenience and gas.
Convenience and gas. There we go. So, Ali, can you tell us more about exactly what you do at Pepsi?
Sure. So I think Sue teed it up very nicely. I focus on leading the retail media activations on Target. So looking at, like mass big box retailers, as well as then down to convenience and gas. So looking at 7-Eleven and Circle K. So kind of both sides of the spectrum. It definitely is like a growing space. So we haven't figured it out yet. But we, have teams set up by retailer across 5 different retailers. So I think, it's becoming a new space that people are starting to get into. I think even like, Nordstrom, Walgreens, everybody has got a retail media network coming. 7-Eleven has I think I can say that. 7-Eleven, please don't cancel me. 7-Eleven has a retail media network coming. So not only is it just like an incremental revenue stream, obviously, but it does, from a media perspective, as Sue talked about, like full funnel, it is definitely, a necessary space. Especially, from our end as a CPG at the end of the day, like we're trying to sell shit. So the closer we can get to, can I say that? Cancel me later. I'm so sorry. But, the closer we can get to, where people are purchasing. So that on-site, in-app placement is really important for us. And really the only way to get that is from a retail media network.
Amazing. So it looks like your job is really to, convert consumers once they come into the retail media sites, right? And you must be inundated with so many different data points, right? What are you paying like close attention to?
What are you buying? Purchase-based data, honestly. So working across, the different retailers, it looks different on both of them. So from a Target perspective, Roundel has such great guest data. We call them guest. So from a customer perspective, they have great guest data. So we rely on all of their, first party purchase based segments. From a C&G perspective, so internally at PepsiCo, we have an entire audience team where we create CDNA, consumer DNA. So we leverage that as well as things like proximity. If you're close to a gas station, things like that. As 7-Eleven starts to create their retail media network, we'll have some of the same, data available to us, a la Roundel. We'll have to build it up a little bit, but, there's loyalty programs and things like that. So there's a wealth of information, again, from a retailer perspective, that we don't currently have access to from C&G, but we will.
Got it. And is any of this data portable outside of retail media? Like can other marketers or vendors use it across YouTube or other platforms?
So from a Target perspective on Roundel, no. We are kind of bound by, I think earlier they were talking about like, what are the KPIs and things? So we're pretty bound by where we can get closed loop measurement. So from a Target perspective, it's pretty limited, quite frankly. So all the sexy stuff, the cool stuff that you work on, I unfortunately don't get to work on anymore because we can't share data. So, Facebook doesn't want another Netflix special and, Target doesn't want to share their sales data. So, it becomes increasingly difficult for us to get, closed loop sales. So that's a big challenge for us is using that data and then sharing it across multiple platforms. Yep. So it is, sorry, that was so rude. We're gonna have to, Alex is following us. Oh no, y'all. Can y'all just start laughing? Thank you.
You're fantastic.
From a C&G perspective, so again, there's a lot of challenges from a data sharing perspective. So like our partners that we work with have to sign an agreement with both of the retailers. We're sharing IRI data to determine incremental sales. So back to the KPI of it is like at the end of the day, every single dollar that I spend, the goal is to drive incrementality. Wow. So for every dollar that I spend somewhere that I cannot, get closed loop measurement on, every other dollar I spend has to work that much harder. So in order to avoid being the architect of my own nightmare, we stick to platforms where we get closed loop measurement and, where we have the ability to drive incrementality. And at the end of the day, look at iROAS.
Got it. So incremental ROAS is obviously the most important. What about like other factors, like let's say, VCR? Are you running any video ads on retail media at all?
VCR is cute.
Yep.
Videos are great.
Okay.
We don't do a ton of that. Again,
Okay.
we are like super, super low funnel. So
Yeah.
a lot of what we do is on site or in the Target app.
Yep.
I don't know how many of you guys are addicted to Target, but like I am shopping from the Target app all of the time. So it's really just like, it's not, sexy brand creative. It's like hero pack shots and like promos, really, really trying to just like drive people as close to cart as possible. Yeah. So video doesn't really do that, or excuse me, we haven't seen video, be a big part of that to date. Now, that's not to say that as the space grows, people are going to be more interested in potentially, watching a Mountain Dew video in the Target app. That could very well happen. But, from what we've seen to date is, it is just, like static banner ads. I know that's like not cool and exciting, but it gets the job done.
Absolutely. Are there, from when I think of Pepsi, right, iconic brand, obviously there's awesome Super Bowl ads, right? Or, Doritos commercials or Pepsi commercials, right? But in terms of just, like the future of advertising, right? Do you see a shift happening more from like big awareness plays or like upfront buys like that and shifting towards retail media? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And again, I hate to like Sue really just like teed this up for me pretty well. So thank you. But yeah, I mean, again, I think again, we're seeing that like more retail media networks are popping up and dollars are shifting that way. And I think we can, all agree COVID, very bad, super bad thing. I think something in like a gross, icky way that like was good. Again, you're like, I will cancel me after this, but like something that did come out of it is just like the acceleration of like new shopping modalities, right? So like people are doing more contactless pickup and things like that, that like those are sticking around, right? Like those are born out of like really necessity during that time, but those are still, pretty heavily, practiced today. So I think again, from a retail perspective, we're starting to see that it's not like using those shopper dollars. It's not just getting people in stores anymore and like seeing the end caps and shelf talkers and things like that. Like we can use those dollars pretty effectively, from a media perspective. And like, if we can get a sale online, whether it's getting shipped or it's getting picked up, that is a huge win for us. So I think it kind of depends on your category. Again, if you're a car, if you're auto, obviously it will look very different, but from a CPG perspective, again, COVID, very bad, increased opportunities to sell things. Great. Sorry.
So, I mean, obviously COVID has changed the shopping experience, right? The consumer journey inside retail media. And you mentioned the additions of pickup and delivery. Are there any other things that have really changed then, I guess, in terms of the consumer experience post-COVID compared to pre-COVID?
I mean, yeah, again, I think there's like been this like proliferation of like, everyone, like D2C brands, things like that. That doesn't, it kind of impacts us to like some degree, but again, I think that more people are seeing like brick and mortar serves a purpose, but there are other ways to sell things and like people are more open to that. So again, just in the last like 2 years, we've definitely seen dollars shift from an awareness perspective, like down, realizing that like if we can get someone, while they're in the Target app and they're shopping, like let's get them there. Yeah. So I think it just kind of depends to some degree again of like what your category is. Like I'm trying to sell things the minute that like you think of it, right? Like a lot of things, even from a C&G perspective, right? It's like single serve. So it's like is it weather triggering, right? Is it 90 degrees outside and like you're really hot and you're 2 miles from a gas station and you're at a red light and you see a mobile banner ad and it's like, a super like cold looking Gatorade or something. It's like, I want to direct you to it as immediate as possible. So I think the immediacy has definitely become more of a thing that we're able to take advantage of.
Awesome. And by the way, you are doing fun and cool things. I think last week in New York City, I saw something about like cola infused pizza, like Pepsi-roni mashups.
Did anybody? Oh, okay.
But I would look at that as sort of like
a bunch of vegetarians, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I tried waiting online. It was around the block. So I was like, scooted. But in terms of, I think, look, when I think of like retail, there's a lot of like drop shipments out there, things that influencers do. When it comes to what you're doing across retail media, do you guys have like limited time offerings like LTOs, and like how does the activations for that differentiate from, let's say, a legacy brand like Diet Pepsi or Doritos?
Kellogg's is not the only person on eBay, but Mountain Dew is a good example. There's so much like flavor innovation and things like that. So actually recently, we had an exclusive with Circle K for Mountain Dew Purple Thunder.
Yeah.
And, we were seeing a lot of like out of stocks early on, and we were trying to figure out what's happening. They are being resold on eBay, similar to the Kellogg's activation. Mm-hmm. So again, I think Mountain Dew is one where, people are like feverish about the brand. Mm-hmm. So that also leans into it. But, when it's exclusive, to a certain retailer or something, I think that, that helps drive that excitement behind it. So more media behind it. If you're, maybe not in the potential target audience, but like if you're as close to it, like there is something behind, obviously I'm sure everyone took an econ class, supply and demand, right? Like that LTO nature of it will drive people into store. I don't necessarily know that it's certainly not a long time strategy, right? Like, but the good news is like, once we do get them, again, going back to that purchase data, like there's the potential, to, cross sell them or something later. So I think, that's one easy way to do it. But yeah, if you're looking for Purple Thunder, Mountain Dew, eBay, they're also selling the window clings, which I thought was incredibly weird. Advertising is being sold on eBay.
Amazing. So I've never tried a Purple Thunder Mountain Dew, but if we did see that ad on, let's say, YouTube or somewhere else, right? Like one thing I always wondered is, as doing contextual targeting on YouTube, we get held to VCR, and then there's some other secondary metrics as well, right? But then we can click through to, let's say, a Target or another retail site, right? So are you paying a very close attention to that data? And then are there cases where you're sharing it back to the agency or sharing it back to the vendor themselves?
Well, as an ex-agency person, I can say this. It's really nice to not work with an agency. So the nice thing about retail media is like we work directly with the partners.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So like Roundel to some degree is like grading their own homework, but they are the vendor and the agency in this case. And then from a C&G perspective, like we work directly with the partners. So no shade to the agencies, but it's kind of nice to not have that middleman in there and like not the politics and things like that. So we are sharing IRI data like directly with our partners who we work with from a C&G perspective. Like every week I'm up to my eyeballs in IRI pulling weekly data. Wow. So they do have purview into that. And that's how they, will ultimately calculate, our sales lift and look at the incrementality of it. From a Roundel perspective, it's very closed loop. Again, a lot of the activity happens on their own sites or their own app. So it's their data at the end of the day. I'm happy to see it and look at it and verify it, but there's really nowhere else that data needs to go other than, back to the people who are then creating my audience segments or things like that.
Got it. Do you feel like you have access to more of the data that you want these days or less with, evolving targeting and privacy regulations?
Yes and no. I mean, in this particular instance, from a retail perspective, yes. I think, again, if I was, back in my other roles and working on like Super Bowl and stuff like that, I think it would be a very different conversation. But I think, again, that's, a little bit of the necessary evil behind some of the RMNs, right? Is like, I'm not going to get that data anywhere else. They're not selling it to anybody. They are keeping it, as close to the chest, and they know that, the brands are going to come to it.
Yeah.
So I do think that from a data perspective, in terms of what we're getting, it's what we need right now. And again, that's not to say that it won't evolve. Roundel, for example, it's only been around since 2019. So it is still relatively like new. But I think, again, from what we've seen, we do about like 60 campaigns a year with them. And so like from that end, like I think that we're getting what we need. I think less data is what I need from them. I need better partnerships, quite frankly. Like I need to be able to go offsite. I need to be able to be on an Instagram or Facebook or something like YouTube. Yeah, yes, please YouTube, buy the YouTube from this man. But it's very limiting, like there is something to be said again for those like very, very low funnel, like in-app on site, but the ability, to get larger reach, given that they have such great, first party purchase segments, would be helpful, because at the end of the day, we're probably just like over frequenting people instead of, being able to diversify a little bit. But again, it's the measurement piece of it that like, if I can't get measurement from it, it actually doesn't do me any good. It's like cool and fun to do, but it doesn't help me. Yeah. So it's less the data that I need from them. It is more their like measurement capabilities and larger partnerships across the platforms and channels.
Got it.
Like awesome. YouTube. Yeah. Am I saying that right? YouTube?
Yeah, I think I heard of it. Yeah.
It's new.
I'm familiar with that.
It's trend.
Platform, right? It's a trend. Yeah.
It's not going to be around.
Okay. So, you're targeting a lot of just lower funnel, shopper intent data, right, to convert consumers. Are you doing any sort of contextual targeting across any of the retail media sites?
Not at great length. Sorry. What?
She told me to hold my mic up.
Oh, yeah, use your inside voice like me. And not particularly. I think a big part of it is just based on like, I think again, Sue, thank you, Sue, by the way, you made this very easy for me, but I'm living that like, retain, reclaim, acquire life. So I really want to know, like, what are you buying? Yep. What aren't you buying? And like, how can I get you to buy my stuff? So the purchase-based piece of it is super important. There's like seasonal things, back to school, pride, those like cultural moments where we'll infuse a little bit of that in there if we're doing like larger like campaigns. Yeah. But for the most part, that contextual piece of it right now, given how new this is, it doesn't play as big of a role. That's not to say that as it continues to grow, we won't be there. I think they talked about earlier, right? Like, we used to buy just on reach and now we're looking at different segments. Yep. So I think that there's definitely the potential for that to evolve more. Yep. But right now, what we have is like, what are you buying? And I'm happy to use that.
So in terms of like, what you're buying or what are you not buying or what are you like leaving in the cart, right? How are you re-engaging those consumers? Like, are you doing sequential targeting? Like, are you involved in creative development as well?
Yes. So again, a creative development is a generous term and no shade to Roundel, but again, it really is just, it's hero pack shots and it's like promo. It's very similar to how they were talking earlier of those like teeny tiny like pencil banner ads at the bottom where like they're focused from a branding perspective. I want to let you know that like you can buy 5 Mountain Dews, for $12. Like it really is just hammering home either a promo or, just like what products are available. So creative, I know everyone's like, oh, personalization at scale and, content and whatever. We're just not in that game yet. Okay. Right now, what's working is again, just like, here are the products. Yep. And here is like the pricing of it. Yep. And that's kind of where we sit. Again, that's not to say that it won't evolve. But for now, creative development is like, is that a clear pack shot of Quaker oatmeal? It's a little blurry. Can you swap it? And that's kind of it. Got it.
So before we open it up to the floor, I think I have one more question. In terms of just like mixed media marketing, right? If you had to do it your way, right? Like what percentage of the budget, like how would you allocate budgets omni-channel? I mean, obviously you still have to drive some awareness, right? And then convert consumers when they get into the retail site. So if Ali could do it her way, what would you do?
That's a dangerous question. I think it depends on like the product and the category. There are some that, are very obvious and some that aren't. I think 50-50 is like a good place to test. Again, like we know that like we've learned so much and they talked about it earlier. Again, I'm just like cheating this whole thing. Like my entire every answer is based on something that someone has already said. So thank you. But we know from MMM like what works really well, right? So like we know that TV is going to be really efficient and we can optimize and we have so many more opportunities. So like we know that space really well and we can make that 50% work really hard. Mm-hmm. If the other 50% again is really focused on driving lower funnel, like you're going to have a better opportunity there. So I think, and again, I'm people out there probably waiting to come after me after this and say otherwise, but I think we've gotten really smart from like what makes sense from like an above the line like media perspective. And even to the point where we're doing, people are doing really sexy, fun things and influencers and all of the cool shit that, Kellogg's was doing. Like we just might have too much money sometimes. So like if you can put it in an area where that like you are optimizing, you are driving as much sales as possible, it's going to make that other 50% that you're spending on the cool, sexy stuff be less risky, quite frankly, until someone comes for me and tells me otherwise.
Awesome. Okay. I think we have 10 minutes left or so?
Oh, that's not there the whole time.
Oh my God. I didn't even know. Oh. Wow. That's cool. Okay.
So no, we're watching YouTube on this thing right here, actually. So
is it okay if we open up the floor to questions?
Well, let's see what they have to ask and then I'll let you know.
Anyone have any questions for Helaly?
So obviously the shopper marketing space is being, disrupted with media networks. And I think like every couple of days, some other, retailers is either partnering with someone or creating their own. I'm curious within your team, how you interact with a Target Roundel versus like a 7-Eleven, a Circle K who doesn't have one. What changes for you? You talked a little bit about, closed loop attribution versus relying on a third party like IRI. Just curious some of the other nuances and how that feels in your position as a client kind of operating in both aspects of that world right now.
Yeah. So I think that the retailers are like so different. There's not a ton of people who are like loyal 7-Eleven or Circle K shoppers. There's a small, section of them that are, but a lot of what we see is, like impulse or like people who are gas purchasers who are able to get in and then ultimately get them on like a promo. So I think from that end, and again, 7-Eleven is starting to create their own because I think that they're starting to realize like, we got to get better at this. Like, yeah, we're driving things. I think one of the biggest outliers from a CNG perspective, and it's so fun. I get to say the word Slurpee like 100 times a day for work. But like we can't really there's no SKU for like a fountain or like a frozen. So we really struggle there. So that is something that like 7-Eleven, probably has that data. So that is something that, I'm extremely excited to, that drives a lot of the business. So I'm excited to get that from their end. I think that's something they can help us with. From a Roundel perspective, again, they are agency, client, vendor, all of the things. So we, kind of sold our souls to them a little bit. And some in full transparency, sometimes it feels a little bit like a tax, but again, like I can't get that data anywhere else. So like, and I think they were kind of part of the first to do it, so I think working with them, we've learned a lot of like, what do you need from a retail media network? What are the outages? So it helps us inform, 7-Eleven, like, hey, here's really like what we think that we need. In areas where we don't have that retail media network, again, it's less about getting people on site, like I don't, maybe someone here would love to hear from you, but like, I don't know who's going to 7eleven.com, and ordering Pepsis or things like that. So it's less about that like on-site experience, but it's like, how can I surround you when I know that you are so close to, that location? So again, it's very different between the retailers themselves. And again, it'll probably evolve. As Circle K will probably have another, a network soon. I think they're, everyone's going to have one. They all have their own data that there's no other way that we can get it unless we give them more dollars. And also to YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah.
I nailed
Well,
that.
okay, so can you actually do location-based targeting in real time without violating privacy?
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah. So we basically, again, we like hand over, like I pull an IRI store list. So I can see like last 52 weeks, like where are the top stores that are selling. I'll use this as an example because Coke just announced they're discontinuing Honest Tea. So like if you're a Pure Leaf drinker, I can look at, the top stores that Pure Leaf has sold at from a Circle K perspective. When we go to the vendors, we can say, when you serve media, like do 2-mile radius around these top locations. And then weekly, we're looking at that so we can determine how do we optimize, is it these stores? Is it other ones? We're looking at all of that in real time, as much as we can by week, to see, how can we change and optimize. Sorry.
It's okay. Any more questions?
I'll share my mic with you, Lori.
Hi, Allie.
Hey, Lori.
What is PepsiCo's stance, and are you seeing it evolve to get commerce, shopper, and the branding closer together? I feel like they've historically really, you guys live separate lives inside one giant corporation, but you mentioned a little bit, like, is the 50% in the cool, sexy stuff, like, how does that impact what you're doing, which I also think is cool and sexy from a retail perspective. So don't
Thank
sell
you.
yourself short. So what do you think? Is that we see other brands that are starting to think about that holistically? Is PepsiCo starting to do that, or?
Yes and no. And I would say this isn't, and thank you. It was a great question. I even when from an agency perspective, when I was on SCJ, it was still something that, we tried for 5 years to figure that out. And I came to Pepsi and I'm like, certainly you guys have figured that out. And that's not the case. So I think everyone is still trying to figure that out. We try to work closely with our, like media counterparts from an internal and even an external perspective for that matter. So like if, I apologize, but like, trying to convince OMD that like, we need to take dollars away from, a back to school branding campaign because it needs to go lower funnel. Like that's not going to go over well, with them. And they'll, push back and make a case to the media clients. So like we kind of go around in a circle. We do have a couple of things where we're working. I think I can media sync. It's not like very fancy, but it's something where we're trying to align those a little bit more and understand what's happening. The challenge is like, we're such a heavily matrix organization. And even from a brand perspective, like we try to talk portfolio, but like from a brand perspective, even like we're a company of companies. So it is very difficult to break down those silos. So at the end of the day, what it really comes back to is, again, that measurement and proving out that it works and saying, show, like, we see brand MMMs and we see ours. And so going back to them and like making that case for it to say, like, I know that every dollar I spend, I'm trying to think of different brands. Every dollar I spend on Naked at Target, right? Like if I can drive, $2 of incrementality, but you're only seeing, 40 cents, from an ROI perspective on Snapchat, like the numbers are there. You can't really argue with them. So that empirical data behind it is going to help. But I think, at the end of the day, we're buying Super Bowl ads, like we're doing all of that stuff. So I think that will remain. It will remain as like a piece of it from like an awareness perspective. But I do think, the more that, we can yell, which I have no problem doing, the louder that we can be about what we're doing and why it's working, I think we'll start to see more of that shift, but those are pretty big silos to break down.
Okay. Actually, I've got one last question.
Yeah, I'll buy YouTube. Oh my God. Jeez.
So 12 more seconds left, but no, any other fun mashups that we can expect, like Pepsi infused beef jerky, Pepsi infused donuts? What can we look forward to?
Maybe there is something that I really want to try is a Flamin' Hot Mountain Dew. I've heard that it tastes a lot more. I see some heads. It tastes a lot like a spicy margarita is what I've heard versus like okay, this gentleman has had some fantastic. So it actually won't like burn your insides. I've heard that it tastes like a spicy margarita. So I'm looking forward to trying that. The other innovation stuff, they don't, you think they trust me with that? I just told you guys like things that I'm probably not supposed to tell you. Okay. So you'll have to Google it.
Thank you so much, Allie.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.